All right, super. So let's start off by taking a quick look where we're at in the process of your training. So if you look, we're down here on 421. We are keeping track of the team part 1. I have myself, Chris Williams, and Cindy Horton. And we're also going to be teaching keeping track of the team part 2, which is next Monday. And then you'll have one more, keeping track of the team part 3. And then you have keeping the business in mind, part 1 and part 2. And then you go straight into closing. You're coming close to the end. Congratulations for that. If you look at the PMP documents, you'll see that the information you have for today is, let's see, keeping track of the team part 1. And you'll have your PowerPoint that we're going to review today, as well as tells you where to reference back into the PMBOK guide to find that information. So any questions before we get started? And everybody is muted upon entry, so if you do want to talk, all you have to do is unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, very good. Let me make this larger. So if you remember me, we helped, Cindy and I both did the review session back. We did critical path and we did earned value management. And today we're actually going to talk about earned value management as part of our class in the second half of today's class. So if you remember, when we were talking about how we were doing the review, we did the review on something you hadn't even covered yet. So it was a little backwards in that component, but that's fine because what we provided you on that review session is some really good content that hopefully you will you'll carry that and you'll help you prepare for the exam. Tonight we're going to go through the PMI version of the content as well, built into this PowerPoint. And so hopefully between those two, it will really gel and make sense, and we can kind of slow down if needed as we go through it. All right, so keeping track of the team, we're going to talk about lead a team and support team performance tonight. Under the lesson's objectives, we have inspire, motivate, influence team members and stakeholders, and then appraise team performance against key performance indicators, and that's where we go into the earned value management. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right, so here we are. Lead a team is our first topic we're going to kick off. So now that the project has been assembled, so I want you to think about this. We got the project, it's been assembled, and we're doing the work. We want to ensure that the team stays on track. You, as the project manager, you have to demonstrate the type of leadership that facilitates collaboration amongst the team and the stakeholders, and it manages conflicts, it removes obstacles, and supports the team's overall performance. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about keeping your project on track and your team on track. All right, for enablers, the important thing to understand with this is that there are many ways to lead a team, and there's no one approach that's perfect for every situation. The appropriate leadership style depends on the situation, the project, the stakeholders, your skills, and a lot of other factors. As a project manager, you must be astute in the various leadership styles and apply the most suitable technique to the moment. So your teams are made up with individuals, different skill sets, background, experiences, attitudes. Collaborative teams typically are more productive than non-collaborative teams. That's an obvious point right there. And as a project manager, you must cultivate the optimal project environment that's best suited for your team. You have to help your team appreciate the project's objectives, the mission of the project, the goals, as well as the value in achieving those aims together. This kind of pulls together what we're going to be talking about tonight. There's a lot of the things are soft skills that we're talking tonight. It's not just formulas like an earned value management. And one of the themes you're going to hear over and over again is that there's not always one way to do these kind of things. This is management's leadership, and it talks about different approaches. We're going to talk about some tools that we can help in managing the team. But some of the stuff, again, is just purely soft skills that we're going to go through tonight. So as we dig through it, we can see that. And again, if you do have a question, please just speak up and we can get to it as you do.
So can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Well, where does it fall under? Does this fall under monitoring, controlling, or executing?
Yes, it does. under, you know what, I'd have to go back and look at my PMBOK guide and refresh myself on the different areas.
Okay, never mind.
But it does, yeah, and I'm trying to remember. This monitoring and controlling is definitely part of it because you're running the project, you're implementing your project.
Well, the only reason I asked is it says control communication. So I wasn't sure if that, when you're talking about, working with the different teams and everything, communication is key, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just trying to keep things alive.
I can tell you there's a whole section in communication that we've taught in the past sessions in the old version, that content is not present in here, so that you'll have more communication, or you may have had more parts of the communication in either the past or the upcoming classes too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so these are the deliverables and the tools that are relevant to the enablers that we just saw. You have a vision and a mission document. We'll talk about the importance of that. The charter, which is the first thing you do when you're setting up a project. I think we know that. The product box, this is just an approach that helps the team visualize and define the vision for a project. And then reward and recognition plan. We'll talk about, some of the parameters around reward and recognition, the difference between the two, and how we want to approach that. Under the tool side, you have diversity awareness. There's a key part that we'll talk about on diversity. Leadership styles and how to vary. Influence matrix, we'll talk about how to use that as a tool to help understand stakeholders and just team players in general. We'll talk about what's something called a salience model, which they also reference this as a 3D model, and we'll talk about why it's 3D. Power grid, so you can measure influence and different things on key stakeholders. Behavioral modeling, challenging the status quo, why that's a good thing. Recognize contributions, how to go about doing that, when to do that. Removing impediments and communicating the vision and what that really does if you do it on a recurring basis, how it keeps your team focused. So a lot of good things coming out of the tool. But again, like I said, kind of a soft skill, if you will. So under vision and mission, let's start there. It's a good place. There's no one person in the project better suited to convey the mission and the goals than you, the project manager. And this is one of your jobs. You talk about the team's progress towards those goals. You do that on a recurring basis. You're also serving as a visionary leader, and you're also helping to educate the team and any other stakeholders of the value that you're going for, what you're trying to achieve, the targets that you have. All along the way, you're promoting teamwork and you're promoting collaboration. So a laundry list of things that you're doing here as a project manager. You're leading this team. You're assisting with the management tools and techniques. You're also removing roadblocks, and you're articulating, again, the project's mission. And you keep that like a drumbeat as you go through the project, and it keeps everybody focused and works together cohesively. So promoting the project's mission and value inspires the team to remain focused, and they also have a sense of pride that comes when they have this singular direction that they're all working towards. So seeing and guiding the project towards near and long-term goals keeps the project moving forward and keeps everyone aligned with each other, which is a critical part. So diversity and awareness. Not all team members, other stakeholders are motivated or inspired the same way. There's variances across the board. You have to recognize, you have to act upon the most suitable and the reasonable approach to lead the project team. Whether that approach is to take charge and you rile the troops, or you quietly work behind the scenes, your job as a project manager is that you have to adapt your leadership style to the situation and to the stakeholders that you have within your project. In order to do that, you have to have awareness of the individuals and the teams, their aims, and their working relationships that are amongst themselves. So we're talking about diversity, right? So cultural and diversity, different aspects these are important elements when you're implementing your effective leadership style. The motivations and the working styles of the individuals and the groups vary greatly based on experience of the team, age of the individual, the culture, the job role, and there's a lot of other influencers that you could add to that. But communication and openness to learn from others and build trust and improve the optimal options are really some of the key things that will help you get your best bet out of this project team. So your competencies in this area become more global and diversified. As you work on more projects, you build this kind of repertoire, if you will, of the ability to do this, and it will serve you well as you go through. All right, leadership styles. As a project manager, you have to possess and you have to apply leadership skills that are going to create and enable a good working environment, and they will guide your project team towards accomplishing the desired result, what the goal of the project is. This requires that you balance ethical, personal, and conceptual skills that help you analyze the situations, and you have to interact appropriately with everybody involved. Because you, the project manager, works with and communicates with a number of different people throughout the life cycle of the project, having strong leadership skills is critical. You got to be able to manage relationships and build trust, collaborate with all the individuals. You got to solve problems. You got to have integrity. You got to show it. You got to guide the team towards successful project close. And sometimes the qualities and skills to do this are tough, but these are critical for an effective leader. So, like we talked about, different leadership styles. You could have a hands-off approach, or you're hands-on or just involved in the day-to-day operations of the different people within your project. Sometimes leadership and management are used interchangeably, the words and the meanings, but they are two different terms and they mean usually two different things. Leadership refers to guiding the team by using discussion and an exchange of ideas, whereas management refers to directing them using a prescribed set of behaviors. This is a long time ago I heard this when I was in sales, is that managers light fires under people and leaders light fires in people. So think of it, right? Internally in your heart, it makes you want to do it to be a part of something, whereas managers will just get people moving, lighting a fire underneath them. Another one is lead as you would like to be led. So if you think about that and how you lead people, do it like you'd want to be done amongst you. Okay. All right, now let's talk about another soft skill, servant leadership. You've probably heard this before. The definition's right up the top. The type of leadership commonly used in Agile, which encourages the self-definition, self-discovery, self-awareness of team members by listening, coaching, and providing an environment which allows them to grow. So rather than just manage projects and teams, trying to keep the project on plan and the team in line, servant leaders can help teams develop and grow as a group and as individuals. They facilitate teams' work by providing coaching and training. They remove roadblocks that impede the work progress, either from the people or the process. They focus on their team accomplishment rather than their team misfires or mistakes. And sometimes people even call them project leaders as opposed to project managers, because they want to draw attention to that change in approach, the servant leadership. Really, one of the key things to understand around servant leadership is that you're working for the team. The team is not working for you. And because of that, you have to focus on their needs. Being a servant leader requires skills such as active listening, coaching, awareness, and facilitation. The team members have the technical skills, but they look to a servant leader to lead with communication and negotiation with outside stakeholders, such as removing distractions and roadblocks. So that active listening is a key part. You're not telling them what to do, you're listening, and you're trying to help them do their jobs that much better. Another quote, the late Larry King said, "I never learned anything while I was talking." That one caught me, and I always like that one because it's true. Okay. So next, let's talk about challenge the status quo. So you have to think, just because something is the way things have always been done, or the way that the products were made in the past, it doesn't necessitate that this is the way things are going to go for this particular project. So challenging the status quo is often a good thing, and it opens new ideas, it opens new perspectives amongst the team. When you challenge the way things are done or being done at the present time, you also assure that everyone involved in the project works together to determine the best approach or the best product, whatever you're working on. It also breaks complacency and blind acceptance. So you think about if people just follow kind of like a herd, if you start challenging the status quo and you're asking for people to get on board and talk about it and, you know, how can we challenge the status quo? They're not complacent. They're thinking about how they would do it themselves. So the concept of challenging the status quo it's a healthy skepticism that can be fostered across the team. So reviewing the current environment and crafting your vision statement, challenging the status quo can come into play here and can help with that when you're building out your vision statement. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about a tool, Influence Matrix. So much of how you lead, or actually even maybe how you can't lead, right, a team is based partially on your influence and the influence of the other project stakeholders. So your ability to influence people to do your suggested course of action or to follow within the plans that you've built as the project, it's dependent on your ability to influence others. But influence goes in many directions. The direction is often dictated by the role or the title. And so if you see upwards, senior management, so influence, it's easy when pushing it down from a senior management or upwards to senior management, downwards to your team or your specialists, outwards, if you're external, it's another view, sideward, project managers, peers, so if you're running across the plane there. And then the salience classification model can also distinguish influence, and we'll talk about that in just a second, based on prioritization, urgency, and other aspects. And I mentioned that's called the 3D model. But again, it's important to understand directional levels of influence, the concept itself, how it impacts your team and your ability to lead the team. But for the exam, for example, I would say you need to understand upwards influence, downward influence, outwards, and sideward. I don't remember the word sideward ever being used in the past, but that's what they have here now, so I'd call it sideward. Okay. All right, so salience model. Like it says, the classification model that groups stakeholders on the basis of their level of authority, their immediate needs, and how appropriate their involvement is in terms of the project. So this is why they call it a 3D model, because it has 3 different points of consideration, right? So authority, needs, and appropriate involvement. So when you're using this, you can help determine, you group your stakeholders into different categories based off of these 3 different considerations. And it helps you understand really how you go about managing, interacting, influencing the stakeholders. You can put them in the different perspectives or different buckets, if you will, based off of that. So I think the next page actually gives us a visual that helps kind of pull this together. So this is what we're calling power grids. And we have 2 different levels or 2 different options here for power grids. You have a power interest grid and a power influence grid. Now these are 2-dimensional, whereas the salience model we just showed was 3-dimensional. But these are just 2-dimensional grids, or you call them a classification model. But what it does, again, is it enables you to group your stakeholders based on 2 factors here. So the power interest grid, you group your stakeholders on the basis of their levels of authority and their interest, power and interest, authority and interest, right? The power influence is a classification model that groups stakeholders on the basis of their levels of authority and involvement in the project, right? So similar to what we just saw on the salience, which puts 3 things into one, this breaks it down: power interest or power influence. You can use these 2-dimensional grids, such as the power interest grid, as a classification method for Documenting the stakeholder analysis results. So when you go through the process of analyzing the stakeholders and how you're going to approach them, how we're going to manage them, right? You can capture those results from this. You classify your stakeholders in the terms of their power, their influence, their impact, and it's useful when it comes to communications and engagement with these individuals. You have a good understanding. For example, let's jump into it. So looking here, you'll see Jane at the top, right? Jane is in the manage closely. She's high power and she's high interest, so it puts her up in the top right category. She has high levels of both power and interest, and we have to manage her closely to maintain a good relationship with her during the project. She requires a lot of interaction. If you look at Joe, Joe's under the keep satisfied, so he's relatively high power, but lower on the interest category, right? So he's lower than Jane in interest. We still have to make sure that Joe's satisfied with the project's progress and the status. And then if you look, Amy and Frank, they have to be kept informed. And Frank needs just really less effort throughout the project. You don't have to put as much into it. So hopefully you see this does take work, right? To classify all of your stakeholders into this grid category. But if you do so at the beginning as part of your plan, and as you know, there's a lot of planning is built into this before you start doing, right? That if you do it appropriately, then you have a good understanding, and everybody on the team that interacts with these stakeholders and who has access to these power grids, whether you choose to pass them out to everybody or to, you keep something to yourself, that this gives you the roadwork of how you want to communicate with them. All right, let's talk about team building. We already said this. Project teams perform better when there's increased cohesion and solidarity across the project team. Good project leadership facilitates the bonding between the project team members. Facilitating team building activities builds unity, but also builds trust, empathy, and focus on the team over the individual. So team building is a useful practice that you can do throughout the life of the project, because we're assuming here that the project team is going to be working together for a long period of time, and they're focused together on the work that they have within the project. So it's kind of like, in some sense, think of it as managing a department, that these individuals assume that they're going to be together, assume that they're going to be working closely for a long period of time, that you are leading them as a project manager. You have to treat them in the sense of what are you going to do to reward, to keep them motivated. And sometimes team building is an excellent way to step back and do something that, like it says, unity, trust, empathy, and focus on the team over the individual. These are some of the outcomes. I remember when I was taking the exam or just going through the class myself a few years ago, this concept of a project, people work on a project, but they have other work that they do, right? It's just a project. Conceptually, what we're talking about here, it helped me to think of these individuals as focusing on this project for a lengthy period of time, working with these individuals, your peers, on a recurring daily basis. So again, project leader, managing these people, keeping them going, keeping them focused. Reward and recognition plans can be built into a project, just like you do in managing a team of people. A reward and recognition program is just a formalized way to reinforce performance and behavior across your team. Reward and recognition plans are generally standardized throughout an organization and approved through corporate channels. We have that at AT&T, right? The singular purpose of this is just to make the team perform well. Everyone to perform at the highest level that they can. So looking at rewards on the left side, it can include monetary gifts. It could be extra vacation time, other perks that you could throw to them, company plaques or trophies or gifts. Although it's common for the terms reward and recognition to be used interchangeably, they are different, and it's important to understand that. You can recognize a person without giving them a reward, right? So remember that. They are two different things. Rewards are, like it says, tangible, consumable items that are given to a person based on specific outcome or an achievement. Rewards can also have a defined start and finish or fixed time, and usually accepted when the specified goal is achieved or attained. For example, receiving a bonus after a successful year is a reward. Now, on the right side, a recognition, this is something that's more personalized. It's intangible. It's experiential. It's an event that focuses on the behavior rather than the outcome. Recognition is not restricted to a set time. It's usually unexpected by the receiver. It's intended to increase the individual's feeling of appreciation. Receiving public acknowledgement is a recognition and appreciation for helping another department. For example, that was short-staffed. You could do that. It doesn't have a reward, but it is recognition. So think of, again, as a project manager, if you're on a long-term project, how would you need to weave in some of these recurring recognition programs or rewards with expectations and clearly defined rules so that everybody understands what you know, how to play the game, basically. Okay. All right, here we go. Guidelines to managing a team. There's a lot to talk about on this one. There's only, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets here, but there's a lot to talk about. So the first up, use emotional intelligence. So we have to use good management skills to manage our project team. And we have a solid staffing management plan as a part of that. We have to update and submit change requests, resolution of issues. We have to have good lessons learned documentation. We have to have productive team members. These are all different components of it. But the first one up is emotional intelligence. We have to use emotional intelligence and other style type methods to enable or flex our behavior in a style that works best for each stakeholder. So basically, like we said, there's not one right way or only one way to do these kind of things. You have to adapt. You have to be able to predict and flex your style to work best for each stakeholder. We have to establish good communication among the team members, both internally and externally. We have to monitor performance on an ongoing basis. And there's a lot with this. We can monitor progress of a team member. We could do it by speaking with them one-on-one. Important thing is when you're monitoring performance, as any manager, any project manager, any leader would do, is don't wait just to do it once a month. You got to get out there. You got to be a part of the team wherever you can or how you can. You want to see for yourself what the progress is being made, and that can help you really where you can boost morale, and your engagement will boost morale. You also want to set a group of metrics for each project to how to measure the team performance, not just the EVM models that we're going to talk about, right? But set expectations and have metrics that everybody understands what those metrics are. You have to establish tolerances for each so that the corrective actions can be taken when you need it. So if you're not hitting your metrics, you know what the tolerance is when you have to take a reaction to it. You have to provide constructive feedback to each team member along the way, and you want to do that on a frequent basis. Think of us as employees, right? We're all employees for AT&T. We want to know whether or not we're on track, or we need to take steps to get back on track if we're off. Performance reviews can be frequent, they can be formal, they can be informal. But if we have to take disciplinary action as a project manager, as a leader of a team, then we have to make sure those are in writing so that we are clear on our communication and expectations for them to recover. So again, much like what we said, you're acting as a manager of people. And then additional training. We have to look for opportunities where we can go outside of our normal supplied amount of training, and if we find additional training that might help improve performance for the team, it's something that we want to keep our eyes open for and we want to consider. All right, next is manage conflict. So this one is really, again, we have to pick out what is the most appropriate approach that we want to use based on the circumstances of the individuals involved. If we do have conflicts on the team, one recommendation is to allow people to have their say, meaning make sure you give both sides a chance to state their case if it is two people or two groups or whatever the case, two different sides. By doing this, you can demonstrate respect, and you can also acknowledge that people's different positions necessary, and you can address, it's just a good way to address the conflict. You want to listen to what each side is telling you, listen hard to what each side is telling you, and you can do that through paraphrasing or just asking questions to dig in to make sure that you understand, everyone understands what's being said. You want to find the areas at issue where both sides are in argument, and kind of drill down to the main points. You want to encourage both sides to find a win-win solution or resolution to the problem. And you want to get everybody's agreement on whatever that resolution is. You want to focus on the reason that the group is coming together to air these grievances, and you want to find a resolution to the problem to help them do that. One of the things that they suggest is when you are going through this process that you set up ground rules before you get started so everybody understands what the expectations are, what's okay and what's not okay. And you can always fall back on the communications management plan. You'll have details in there of some of the boundaries or the guidelines that we're talking about. And lastly on this subject is if you do have conflict amongst team members, you can always implement the conflict management approach of confrontation, focusing on the problem, not the people. It helps you diffuse conflicts early, and you can avoid escalation amongst different team members. So that's managing conflict. Again, a lot of different approaches, soft skills that you can take to curb that if it does occur. And the last one is establish an issues log to track and assign project issues. So when you're going through the implementation of your project, it is a good idea to establish an issues log. So you understand issues as they come up, you track them. So if they do reoccur or they could be part of lessons learned, something that you could share. It's also good just for regular follow-up with the project team. When you're meeting with them, you can talk about it. Make sure that everybody understands what happened, why it happened, how to avoid it in the future. And you can also use it to hold whoever is accountable for it as you resolve the issue. And if they're responsible for resolving the issue, you can use that issue log as a tracker to help make sure that they stay on top of it. All right. So that goes off of Section A, and then we go straight into the next section, which is support team performance. And for this, I'm planning to hand it off to my partner in crime. Let me see if she did join. You know what? I don't see that she's on the call. She prepared for this, and I did not. So hold on a second, guys. Let me see if I can try to find her one more time. I apologize. This has never happened before. I'll be right back. All right. I cannot get a hold of her. Like I said, I've never had this happen before. Hold on just one second. Let me see if I can find if she's ever sent her notes. If not, we'll just kind of work our way through this next section. Yeah. Okay. All right. So guys, again, this next section, Cindy Horton was going to review this with you. She prepared for it. Unfortunately, she's not on the call. So I'm going to go through this, but I don't have a lot of the extra backup content that I would normally have if I had prepared for it. So I'm just going to apologize in advance. But I am scheduled to do the EVM section. So this will be just a handful of slides that we're going to go through, and we'll take a break, and then we'll pick back up on EVM. So bear with me. So enablers for this section, we have appraise team performance against key performance indicators. We have support and recognize team growth and development. We have a determine appropriate feedback approach, and we have verify team member performance improvement and support team task accountability. So our deliverables on this is the RACI matrix. Some of us may use RACI matrix in our jobs today. Management by objectives, benchmarking, and performance reports. And then on our tools, we have RACI matrix again, task boards, performance tracking tools, information radiators, burn up charts, earned value, throughput metrics, cycle time, and then the value stream map. All right, so we have key performance indicators, or KPIs. This is something we often use in AT&T, right? A set of metrics used to evaluate a team's performance against project vision and objectives. KPIs can use the SMART acronym. When we're doing our goals for the year or commitments for the year, we're often encouraged to make sure that they are SMART, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And if we can build KPIs that are just that, then everyone has a clear understanding of, that they are specific. They know exactly what they have to do. They know how they're going to be measured. They believe that they're achievable because you've done the work to make sure that the metrics that you have are achievable. They're relevant. What are they doing? Are they rolling up to the company's, like we have our cultural pillars and different things that we measure, key initiatives for the company, and then time bound. So they understand when they start and when they finish, or when the cutoff is on the metrics, so they understand hopefully when they're going to be measured through what period of time, if that makes sense. Team culture and empowerment. Like I said, in projects, the team is the most important part and must be unified. Empowering the team to make decisions in a timely manner increases the team's responsibility to deliver a product with complete ownership. Interfering with the team is disruptive and reduces motivation. We want to encourage the team to foster team collaboration and decision-making. And the team should be included in when you clarify and prioritize requirements. They should be a part of that. Splitting requirements into tasks so they understand, help make a voice. If, if so-and-so is better suited to take on a certain task, then they work together and they work to assign tasks when things are being split up so that the team performs better as a whole. And then estimating the effort so they all understand and buy in on the amount of work it's going to take to get from wherever they're at to the end, to the finish of the project. Because if you're part of the process, then you're also usually bought into the process and you're aligned with it. And I think that's where this is coming from. Next, we have team structure and workspaces. So important elements for leading and managing projects is the team's environment and location. So you think of, like we are today, right? A lot of us are working remotely from home, but normal times, post-COVID, let's just say, that once we go back to normal, then we can take these into consideration as to how do we differentiate our interaction and our communication. It's easier to manage a group of people that are in the same office that you see physically every day. You can pull them into a conference room. You could have that face-to-face, and then they could break. and the challenges that come with scattered, diverse group across different time zones, different forms of communication or technology that may be working across. All of these are things that you have to bring into consideration. But meaningful, like I said, meaningful interaction is a core tenet of Agile, and you'll learn that in your book. Team members need to be able to contribute from everywhere and at any time. And luckily, with the advances of technology, I mean, if you're like me, we're able to do our jobs as we're not just pinned at our desk anymore. We can do our jobs as we're moving around. Everything from phones and tablets to computers, and with cellular capabilities allows us to operate and do our jobs from a variety of remote locations. Everyone is engaged at all times and can take initiative when needed. So you want a team that's focused. And co-locating the team in a shared workspace fosters more informal and immediate collaboration. People talk amongst the water cooler, like you always say. People can step up and step into an office or into a cube, and they can talk in little breakout sessions. I think, like as we move to Microsoft Teams within AT&T as an example, I think that it's going to help us have some of these breakouts, and some of this, it's going to foster some of this informal collaboration other than just picking up the phone. And establishing a culture of fluid communication and engagement in a workspace that promotes positive interactions make leading and managing the team easier. These are pretty straightforward and logical. So some team building activities. Using team building activities to influence diverse individuals from many functional areas, each with their own goals, needs, perspectives to work as a cohesive team for the good of the project. So you can do things, if you're face-to-face, you can do them together, like a picnic. Obviously, that's the old school way, right? But most of us aren't that way. And we want to try to build in team activities that we can use throughout the day. Good example, if you're like me, on my team at AT&T, we built our March Madness brackets, and that was a team building activity. We had a ton of fun with that. Created a team room in WebEx Teams, called it March Madness, invited everyone to attend, didn't make it mandatory. Everybody filled out their brackets, and we had a lot of back and forth. It was a great team building activity that cost nothing, and we're able to weave it in within our work during the day. So again, formal, it could be informal, like we did. It could be brief or extended, and facilitated by the project manager or a group facilitator. So obviously, the morale and the camaraderie are all increased when we effectively use team building activities. And then team performance assessments. Assess and identify the potential of each team member on a continual basis. So I think the key word there is assess and identify, right? But continual is on a regular basis, not just once a year. It can be informal or formal. And the purpose of the assessment is to improve interaction between team members. So you understand people's performance, their strengths, their opportunities for improvement. You can help them with that. And by getting everybody, having an understanding where everybody fits and helping them get to the best, it helps improve the interaction amongst each other. You can help them solve their own issues. You can deal with conflicts. You can improve skills and competencies of the team members as you identify opportunities. You can increase team cohesiveness as a result as well. So techniques for assessing team performance, you have ask key questions to the team members. Speak to the members frequently through one-on-one meetings and regular project meetings. So you can do it in two different levels. Provide constructive criticism and acclaim to team members as necessary. Evaluate individual performance. And then lastly, remove underperforming team members or reassign their work to a new resource. Performance assessment tasks. So comparing performance to goals. Using KPIs is a good one. We already talked about that tonight, right? But using metrics to help that. Re-clarifying roles and responsibilities. It's a good idea to have a roles and responsibilities documentation that you can reflect on, you can share. If there is questions about what should I be doing, or if somebody's going outside of their role, you can always steer them back to the roles and responsibilities document. Delivering positive as well as negative feedback. Again, it's a skill that you have to learn to do. Discovering unknown or unresolved issues. So the key there is discovering. You want to be on top or understand what's happening within the team and the dynamics of the team. So the performance assessment will help do that. Creating and monitoring individual training plans so that you tailor the needs of the individual to the training opportunities that you have at your fingertips. And then establishing future goals. Again, performance assessments, these are key things that you want to do. All right, so hopefully you guys have seen this before. I know I've seen it many times outside of studying for the PMP, but these are developmental stages for a team. So if you assemble a team like a project we're talking about here, the first stage is forming. So team members get to know each other and trust one another. A lot of times they're sharing personal connections. They're talking to each other on a personal level, trying to find those commonalities of common threads, if you will. And while doing so, then they understand that the similarities that they have in their past or their present, and they start to build that trust. And then the next phase or stage is storming. Team members begin to assert themselves and control emerging issues. You've seen this on any team probably that you've been a part of, where somebody steps up first and asserts themselves. They want to claim a certain point or position within the team, and that's usually a common theme, is a storming again, people falling into their categories or falling into their roles. And then norming, team begins to work productively without worrying about personal acceptance or control issues. So people understand how they are kind of mold together as a team and who has strengths in what categories, and they can be productive as a whole. And they start working together. And then performing, the team is working at optimum productivity and is collaborating easily, communicating freely, and solving its own conflict problems. And that's where we want to be, right? Performing. And then adjourning, team members complete their assigned work and shift to the next project or assigned task, and they start dismantling or breaking up the team. Just know that on the exam, you'll want to know these stages, the order of the stages, and just pretty much you can follow along with what the content is here to describe each one of them, and I think you'll be fine on the exam. Effective teams. So again, the project manager's role, responsibility to build the team and foster the teamwork. Effective teams work collaboratively. They communicate effectively. They develop trust among team members. They manage conflicts within themselves, and they promote collaborative decision-making and problem solving. All right, management by objectives. Teams with clear objectives are more productive and driven. So you think about the times that you've been a part of a project team or just a team for work, right? If you don't have clear objectives of what you're all trying to achieve, you feel like you're floundering. And you think about the times you've been on part of teams where you have clear goals. It could be put on a piece of paper. It could be discussed at every team meeting like a drum that beats. You understand, everybody understands what their objectives are. And because of that, you know when you start to do something, if it is headed towards that objective, it's going to help meet that objective. It keeps the team productive and driven. Project managers and teams should collaboratively set objectives. Again, it's true that if anybody, it's human nature, if you're part of the process of building objectives, then you're buying into those as you go through as opposed to being forced onto you. And so that's why they should be set collaboratively. Objectives should be challenging yet attainable. It's part of SMART. We talked about under the KPIs, right? Building metrics, you want to make sure they're SMART. Same thing goes with objectives. An objective setting can be conducted at the start of the project or a phase of a project. or throughout the project lifecycle as an iteration planning session. So agile iteration planning sessions come to mind there. However you're building the plan, again, you can do the objective settings at different stages. Feedback. Continuous feedback is essential for agility. So in the agile, they constantly look for feedback to improve on the latest iteration of whatever the product is. Regular feedback is crucial for all teams and all methodologies and team environments. And discovering the most appropriate and timely feedback is a project manager's responsibility. Again, the project manager is charged with so many different responsibilities, and this is just one of them, is timely feedback, when and how to give it, and when and how to ask for it and collect it. All right, performance tracking tools. So we have the Scrum, Agile, is it Kanban boards? I'm sorry, I'm not up to speed on this one, but based on the Japanese management method of pulling cards to various stages as they're worked on, physical or electronic boards can track work as it progresses across various stages or categories. I think I've seen this before. I did a tour of a Toyota plant in Kentucky, and they had a centralized board where they were moving things across the cards, and this is exactly what that was. Throughput metrics, measurement of the team's work that has moved from one stage to another stage over a certain time. The cycle time, measurement of work that has progressed all the way from planned to completed or delivered. And quality metrics, various measurements to track quality, deliverables, defects, and acceptable output. You still should have a whole section on quality. Have you gone through the chapter where you're talking about the different quality metrics? If you haven't, it should be coming up.
No.
Everything's, is that no?
No, not where it was specific to just quality metrics, no. Like
Okay.
we touched on a couple of them in different sections, but.
Okay. It may be coming up then. All right. Earned value. We're going to talk about that tonight. Tracking cost and effort performance against planned value. Earned value management. That's our last section tonight. Bar charts or Gantt charts. Using the project schedule to track performance over time. Waterfall versus agile. Different ways to run a project. And then velocity. Measurement of total output from an iteration to attempt to predict future iteration outputs. Again, agile methodology here, all interwoven. All right, and this is where we go to earned value management, and I think we're deserved a little break here. So let's take a pause for 10 minutes. I got 6:57 my time, Eastern time, so let's just come back at 7:10, and we'll get started again, and we'll pick up on earned value management. Thanks, guys. All right, let's get back to it. All right, hope everybody had a nice little break. Let me make sure I am, yeah, I'm not muted. I'm good. I should be able to be heard. All right, so now we're going to jump into the final section, which is Earned Value Management, or EVM. Again, if you remember, a few weeks ago, we had a review session where we talked about critical path, and we talked about Earned Value Management. Again, we did the review of EVM before you actually were introduced to EVM and the content. This is where you're introduced to it, but since we did it backwards, this will just help reinforce what we've already talked about, and hopefully it will come together by the end. All right, so like it says, EVM is a methodology that combines scope, schedule, and resource measurements to assess project performance and project progress. And this is going to be done throughout the project execution. You can measure project progress by comparing actual schedule and cost performance against the plan as it's laid out in the schedule baseline and the cost baseline. So if you go back to schedules and cost baselines, you're going to actually get the plans that you're going to use to base off of this. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So assessing the value of the work, first you have to determine what work actually has been performed. So you know in the plans, in the baseline, what you should have done at a certain point, you have to balance out against what you actually did for that period of time. And you want to know what the value is that's contributed to the project. So you do performance reviews all throughout a project, and these performance reviews actually, the status meetings that you have, will actually take into account each one of these. So you can monitor and measure the progress, and you can take action as needed. So let's go back to planning. So when you're planning the project in the beginning, before you get to execution, you would break down the project work into work packages or just activities. And when you do that, you assign a budget and a schedule, so a dollar amount and a time amount to each work package or activity, if we're talking about that. And because each increment of work is time phased, you can look for schedule variances when the work's not completed against the plan. And it's valuable to understand the monetary value of the work contribution, and you'll see that right there in the bullet, right? Important to understand the monetary value of the work contribution. So cost and schedule performance are the things that we look at. The EVM approach to monitoring cost and schedule performance, this is going to provide metrics that show variances from the baselines and the scope and the schedule baselines. And once you have this information, as a project manager, you can identify appropriate corrective action when it's needed. It's not just fixing things that are going off the rails. You can also use this as an effective means to control against future cost and future schedule problems. You can correct things before they even happen. So that's the importance of earned value management. You want to use it throughout the project and these project status review meetings, and you use it to correct things before they get any worse, and you use it to head things off before they even become problems. So what's involved? The EVM variables. There's 3 independent variables that we're talking about here, and you see them in the middle there. You have planned value, which is PV. You have earned value, which is EV, and you have actual cost, which is AC. So planned value, earned value, actual cost. These are the 3 variables that we're going to use throughout the rest of the section here. All right, and let's start off with, planned value. So planned value is the authorized budget assigned to the scheduled work. Again, the authorized budget assigned to the scheduled work. This amount is specified in the project's cost baseline. In simpler terms, you can think of PV is the value of the work scheduled to be done at a particular time, right? So the value of that at a specific beginning and end. This is the notes that we have to work off say that this is an example, but it's really not much of an example. This shows 3 different line graphs here. But so I'm gonna kind of tell you an example, and I want you to just kind of see if you can follow along verbally here. So let's assume that we've got a project and we're going to build a shed in their backyard. It involved 3 tasks to be done. So we have flooring as as one task for building the shed. We have drywalling. Assume we're going to drywall our shed. And we're going to roof. So flooring, drywalling, and roofing. And they have to be done in sequential order. They can't be done in parallel or at the same time. So flooring, let's say, is budgeted at $200 and it takes 2 days. Drywalling comes next. It's $800 and it takes 4 days. And then the third and final step is roofing. It's $600 and it takes 3 days. So you can see the pattern here. It's 200, 800, 600, right? And the question is, if somebody came up and they said, what was the total budget calculated for the first 6 days? What was the planned value for the first 6 days? So go back and look at it. You have flooring was 2 days, drywalling was 4 days, and then the roofing was 3 days. So you know that flooring and drywalling, those are 6 days total. And if somebody asks you what the planned value was for the first 6 days, you wouldn't even consider the roofing portion. You would just stop with the flooring and the drywalling. So flooring was $200 and drywalling was the budget $800. So you add those 2 together, you get $1,000. So if somebody says, what's the PV, the planned value for the first 6 days of this project? You just add those 2 together and you get $1,000. The answer is the planned value is $1,000. Okay, let's move on to earned value. So earned value is the measure of work performed expressed in terms of the budget authorized for that work. And the right there. It says EV equals percent work complete to date times budgeted cost. So if you go back to the example that we used in our review session, we talked about pouring sidewalk, right? $20 a linear foot, if I remember correctly. But we plan out how much we're going to have built, planned value, at a specified time, and EV is the percent you actually did times the budgeted cost. So earned value is a measure of work performed expressed in the terms of budget authorized for that work. In other words, EV is a composite measurement of both cost and time performance in relation to schedule or planned cost and time performance. EV, like we said, is calculated by multiplying the percentage of the work completed by the budgeted cost for the activity as it's laid out in the cost baseline. So in order to determine EV on a project work to date, we have to look back at the cost baseline, number one, to determine how the costs were assigned originally. If the PV was determined by the percentage complete to date method, then you want to apply the same method of assessing EV. In other words, EV indicates the value of the work is actually performed during a particular period of time. Just know that. So here's another example. Again, it's not really showing up here, so just kind of listen to it and see if you can visualize it. So we have the manager of the shed building project receives a project report at the end of day 6, which says that the flooring task, which was $200, 100% complete. In the drywalling task, which was $800, they didn't do it all. In the first 6 days, they fell short in that task, and they only did 75% of the drywall. So we're going to calculate EV for the completed work. So what you're going to do, again, it's the percentage of work complete to date times budgeted cost. So we have 100% of the flooring work done at $200 budgeted for the flooring work. And then we're going to add 75% of the drywalling work done at an $800 budget. So 100% of $200 for the flooring is $200. 75% of the $800 budgeted for drywalling is $600. So you add 200 and 600, you get the EV is actually $800. Whereas if we would have been right on schedule, the EV would have been $1,000. That's what we had planned. But we fell short because we only did 75% of the drywalling, so that knocked us down. And so we're at $800 EV. We have not completed all the work. Hopefully this is jogging some of the points that we had talked about a couple weeks ago. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about actual cost. And again, it's the realized cost incurred for the work performed on an activity during a specified time period. So actually, the actual cost of what you spent. It refers to the total amount of cost incurred while performing the work, either during completion of a scheduled activity or during the completion of a WBS component, which is a work breakdown structure component. Actual cost is calculated and documented once the work is complete. That makes sense, right? You don't know the actual cost until you're done, until you actually can realize how much did you spend. That's an important understanding, that you don't predict actual cost. Actual cost is after the work is performed and after it's complete. So going back to that shed building project example, we have flooring, we spent $180 and we spent $700 on drywalling. Those were the actual costs in the example that the book has. So you just add those two together. 180 plus 700, you have $880 is the actual cost over the first 6 days of the project. So no formula there. It's just how much did you spend at the end of it. All right, so now let's get into some of our different measurements or different formulas. We have EVM measures for schedule control. So we have two. On the left, you see schedule variance, and on the right, you have schedule performance index. So if you remember, we talked about, I remember going through my exam as just knowing that every time you have the word index, there's a division there. And in this case, it's instead of EV minus PV, it's EV divided by PV. And you'll see that same pattern. So these are the most commonly used measures for schedule control. So it's important that you memorize these two formulas so you understand it. So let's talk schedule variance. It's a measure of schedule performance expressed as the difference between the earned value and the planned value. So what you actually did, what the work you completed, and what was budgeted or planned, the planned value. So EV minus PV equals schedule variance. So if you have a positive schedule variance, that indicates that the project is ahead of schedule, meaning if you earned your EV is greater than your PV, then you're ahead of schedule. If it's zero, that means you're right on schedule, and that's a good thing. If it's negative, like in our example with the shed, we didn't complete all of the flooring, 75% of it to be exact. So we have a negative number, which indicates that our project is behind schedule. Now, if you look on the schedule performance index side, this is a measure of schedule efficiency expressed as a ratio of earned value to planned value. An SPI number greater than 1 indicates that the project is ahead of schedule. Again, the EV is greater than the PV. An SPI of 1 means that the project is right on track, and an SPI of less than 1 indicates that the project is behind schedule, like in our example that we used with our shed. Okay, so that's schedule. Then we have two more for cost. In your head, categorize them as schedule and cost. They'll help you get through this, trust me. So we have cost variance, is the amount of budget deficit or surplus at a given point in time expressed as the difference between earned value and the actual cost. Earned value and the actual cost, so EV minus AC. So a positive cost variance, or CV, indicates that the project is performing under budget. A zero CV indicates that the project is on budget. And a negative CV indicates that the project is performing over budget. So these two relevant right here, you take these two components, EV and AC, and you think about earned value is a monetary value assessed at the work that you've completed at any point in time, right? And you're usually looking at the planned value, what you should be, and what you earned, how far did you get, if it's equal to it. But this just takes into account the actual cost, which is another component there, and it'll help you measure just from a cost controls perspective. So to understand the relation and understand the how the formula is calculated, and you'll be good. So on the right side, cost performance index is a measure of the cost efficiency of a budgeted resource expressed as the ratio of earned value to actual cost. So again, EV divided by AC. So the CPI greater than 1 indicates that the project is under budget. And a CPI of 1 means the project is on budget. And a CPI less than 1 indicates that the project is over budget. All right, before we go on, I'm going to pause here. Any questions on either schedule control or cost control? There's 4 important formulas here.
Hey, will these be the acronyms like EVAC, or will they be actually on the test spelled out earned value, actual value?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think the terminology is used as these acronyms, CV, AV, AC. So it's important that you know the acronyms, but also what are the words behind them. Okay. Know both. Yeah. Okay. And again, the variance indicates usually the difference between the deficit or surplus, and the index indicates a division in there. And it's always against greater than 1, 1, or less than 1. And the cost variance, yeah, it's always going to be positive 0, or negative. And that's a consistent piece there.
Okay, and then when you were doing earned value, you talked about having to look back at the cost baseline to see how it was approved. What did you mean by that?
So in order to, in order to determine EV of the project work to date, you have to look back at the cost baseline to determine how the costs were assigned originally. So you understand for that particular period of time, for that activity, what was the budgeted cost assigned to it. So you know what the planned value is, basically. And you have to use EV, which is the percentage that you completed times the planned value. And that cost baseline will give you the planned value for that particular activity.
Okay, but in the example, you just gave it to us, though. So we had it, but had we not had it, like in real life, to get it, we would need to look back.
Yeah, you got to look back. Yeah, in a real life example, all of these examples you're going to get on the exam are going to give you they're going to give you the cost. And so you'll know what the planned value is. You'll just have to calculate the EV.
Okay.
So it may not be in your face, explained perfectly. You'll have to, I think Matt LaDuca said it well, is that a lot of times when you're going through the questions on these examples that you're going to use these formulas for, they're going to give you a lot of information that you probably won't need. You want to be able to filter down just to the key points that you think are critical that you're going to use in the calculations here. And they're not going to code them as something else or call them something else. They'll list them, but they're going to give you excess. If they do the kind of exams like they have in the past, they're going to give you excess, unuseful, unneeded information. They're not going to go with that. That's the level of trickery I'd say that they're usually up to, is giving you more than you need and making you filter down. But they're not going to call planned value something else, and then you're going to have to say, well, this must be planned value. They're going to kind of pretty much feed it to you, I think.
Okay, I'm following. Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, so now we have estimate at completion analysis. It's EAC. This is another one, the current projected final cost of the project. So at any point in time, you can have an estimate at completion. If you have to reassess what your final cost is going to be because you're at all your project status meetings, you're like, we're off the rails, we're off the track, our budget's out of whack now. How much, somebody says, well, how much is the final cost going to be? EAC tells you at any point in time, you can go back and you can estimate how much money you're going to spend at the end of it, all right? Estimate at completion, the final cost of the project. So like it says, based on the current spending efficiency, so you're going to use the CPI calculation we just talked about, which tells you, either above 1, 1, or below 1. Calculated from the following formula, where BAC is the projected budget at completion. So you have EAC, estimate at completion, and you have BAC divided by CPI. So budget at completion is your original budget that you were given. CPI is how are you doing right now in the midst of the project? Are you performing on plan? Are you ahead, or how's your cost, right? And so you think about it just logically. You have your budget at completion, what you were given to work towards, and the CPI tells you how efficiently you're spending if you're on track, and you divide BAC divided by CPI, it gives you EAC. So just know that. So again, just know the formula, know the components, and know that it's used to be able to calculate what the final cost will be when you're in the middle of a project, or at least you already started, right? That's the key part there. All right, and then the last one is estimate to complete. Estimate to complete. So the difference between estimate at completion and estimate to complete, ETC is the amount of money needed to complete the project. So instead of saying, what's my total cost going to be now at the end of the project, it says between now and the end of the project, how much more money do I need to ask for? If I'm completely out of budget, I got no money left in my pocket, how much more money do I need to finish this project? And that is estimate to complete. So if you have to go in and put a request for additional funding, this is probably going to be one of the things that you'd use. How much more money do you need to finish the project? No more, no less. And that's what this will give you. So it's ETC is estimate at completion, which we just calculated, divided by actual cost. So you think of it logically, estimate at completion is your final cost minus how much you've already spent, and that tells you your ETC. So this one is a straightforward calculation in my mind, and hopefully it is in yours as well. Okay, so that was the last slide here on this. I do want to go back to some of the content that we reviewed before. Not that, I'm sorry. Here. So these are all the formulas that we shared after the last meeting, the review meeting. So we have earned value. It's percent completed times planned value. And again, planned value is going to be how much work for a specified period of time and equated in a monetary value, so money. Schedule variance is EV minus PV, so earned value minus planned value. And then you have that schedule performance index, EV divided by PV. Then you have your cost variance, EV minus AC, and then your cost performance index is EV divided by AC. So again, the same, you can see how that works. Then you have to complete performance index. We didn't talk about this in our content tonight, but this has been on the exam before. So this is estimate to complete. We just talked about that. This puts it in an index. Just know that. This one may or may not be on the exam because it's not in the content that we've been given to train you on. This would be the extra piece if you want to memorize and understand what it is. I think that it would be good to know. It'd be one of those things that I would memorize, and I would then write it down really quickly when you start the exam so you can forget about it. But you have it on a piece of paper in front of you. All right, and then we have estimate at completion. We'll get through some different options here, right? Pervasive issue, remember this, where it's a problem's going to keep reoccurring. So estimate at completion is a reassessment of our total cost spent. Knowing that we're screwed up, how much money are we going to spend total at the end of this project? So if you have a problem that's recurring over and over again, you can use this formula. If you had a problem that was a one-time anomaly, it's not going to happen. You're going to be back on track. You're going to get back in line. You can use this formula. And then estimate, that primarily used for estimate to completion calculations where you can weight SPI or CPI. So if you want to put more weight in schedule versus cost performance index because it means more, you have that option. That's the third final. I would be really surprised if all three of these came up. I'm sorry. I'd be surprised if this last one came up. I don't remember it popping up on my exam is what I was trying to say. I was thinking about these two complete performance index. I'd be surprised if they pop up as well, but these are good to know as well. And then the estimate to completion, we just talked about EAC minus AC is that other formula. They're not in the same order that we just reviewed, but they're all here. Just know that. All right, so that's EVM. Any questions on how to use it or how to calculate it?
I have a question for the estimate at completion. When we use the budget at completion, it says sum of all budgets established for the work to be performed. But are we talking about like for the whole project, or in the previous example, like just during the 6 days of work?
So are you talking, did you say budgeted completion is the sum of the whole work? Is that what you said?
Yeah, like the sum of all budgets.
Yeah, so budgeted completion is at the start of a task or start of an activity or a work package, you're going to have a budgeted completion, and that's going to be the total cost at the end of that. It could be a project, depending on how it's broken up, but at the end of that time period, when you're done, the budgeted completion is your estimated budget for that whole that whole work package.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So here it is, where budget at completion is the projected budget at completion. Yeah, just meaning it's, when you start, this is your number that you're working off of. This is how much you plan to spend, how much you've allocated, how much you've budgeted for this. And then estimate at completion is basically saying you've gotten off track somewhere in the process. And now I want to know, give me a revised view of how much you're actually going to spend, your projected final cost of the project, and so it takes into account what you were supposed to do, and then your spending efficiency, and you do that division right there, and it gives you what the new total cost is looking to be, your estimated new total cost. Okay, what else? All right. Well, we can wrap up early tonight if there's not any other questions. Give you back 20 minutes. You still get credit for the whole 2 hours there, guys. But go back. I want to apologize for the misfire on that midsection. I did get a text back just a few minutes ago while I was talking. She's okay. It's completely just slipped off her schedule. So we'll be back together next Monday, and she's committed she'll be there, and we will cover the next section together, and I look forward to that. And so hopefully you're able to get something out of just reviewing the slides and hearing me read them out loud in that middle section. Again, apologize, but I think the content's there, and the good news is that it wasn't as detailed, and I think it's a lot of soft skills and stuff that we're probably familiar with, whatnot. So hopefully you're able to get through that. So again, I'll go ahead and call it, and we'll close out the meeting. And both Cindy and I look forward to coming back and doing the next section with you next Monday. All right, guys, have a great night. Until we talk again, take care.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.